And thank you for your patience in waiting as well. I know it was a long day, so I sincerely thank you for that, and for what is a good presentation of your accounts as well. So thank you for all of that. The financial annual financial statement for 2016, for the year ending 2016. Have you got a copy of that at your disposal, Mr. McBride? Yes. Can you turn to page 16 of that report, please? You'll see there's a section on travel and subsistence payments concerning the Family Support Agency. Can you explain to me, if you can, just very quickly, what that's about?
Well, in simple terms, it was about an individual member of staff double claiming.
Okay, that's in very simple terms. So where was this? What part of the country?
Family Resource Centre in
2013.
2013 it was, so actually predates the agency, but nevertheless it was an issue we
the TUSLA had a role in some of this in terms of how it played out, but yeah. We'll get to the dates in a second. But in terms of the location, it was Waterford, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the double payments were because the individual involved was employed by a local family support agency, but also was he on the board, or was he a director of the national agency?
On the board.
On the board.
On the board. Okay. And he double claimed essentially. Mm-hmm. Okay. So how did this first come to light?
Through CNAG audit, I believe. Yeah. It was through CNAG audit. They did an audit of the Family Resource Centre. They would often select some of our funded agencies to conduct audits on. Now, we strongly believe that the claim that was made against the Family Support Agency was a valid claim, and it was authorised, reviewed, validated, and even so far as to go and check dates and locations to validate the claims made, and they were all signed off and approved, as I'm sure the CNAG will confirm.
I'll get to the CNAG's role in one moment, but I'm curious as to what you mean by a valid claim. So maybe you might just talk me through then how an individual would claim. Yeah. How would that work in practice? Okay. Is there a form to be filled in?
Yes.
Okay, talk me through that, please.
So they would complete a form for the business journey that was undertaken, as in the date, the starting point, the end point, if there's kilometres to be claimed, if there's subsistence to be claimed. Yeah. If there's any receipts, they would be vouched and attached to the form. It would be signed off by another senior member, obviously somebody above their grade. And
this is a travel and subsistence form, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. What else would be on it, on that form?
If there were expenses incurred as part of the business, carrying out business, they would be attached to the form, and then they would be validated. And would
there be anything else on that form?
The reason for the trip is in the explanation as to why it was necessary.
Anything else that you're aware of?
The individual signature and the dates and so on. Just
One important point that, and maybe it isn't on it, but I would imagine that you would have to declare as well that you were not claiming for the same expenses from any other organisation. Would that be on the form? Would that be something you would have to sign?
I can't confirm what was in place in 2013.
Well, no, sorry, I'll come to you in a second, Mr. McCarthy. Sorry, are you saying that there isn't a requirement there?
I'm saying there would be within today, but this happened pre-TUSLA.
At the time, I'm talking in real time, when this individual claimed expenses and had to claim for the expenses over a 5-year period that were double claimed essentially and filled in the forms. On those forms, would the person have had to sign as part of that a declaration that the expenses were not claimed elsewhere? You're saying no, Mr. Hughes, and you're saying no, Ms. Hanlon, you're saying no, Mr.
I don't know.
Sorry, can you answer that, Mr. McCarthy?
I certainly can. It was absolutely the case that all of the claims that were submitted to the Family Support Agency had an assertion that no claim in respect of the same period has been or will be made against another government department or elsewhere. That was on all of the claims, and it was the requirement of the Family Support Agency at the time.
So that's obviously different to what you said. So there was a clear requirement. It was part of the declaration that would be made that the organisation would then be informed by the claimant that, listen, I'm not claiming expenses elsewhere. The only place I'm claiming expenses is from yourself, which actually didn't turn out to be the case. So I'll get then to Mr. McCarthy. So what you're saying is that the CNAG routinely does an audit of different organisations, and I would imagine, Mr McCarthy, that would look at governance and a range of different issues. And
yes,
how did you then come across this issue?
I would say that I wouldn't characterise it as an audit, a formal audit.
Yeah.
It was an inspection visit,
okay.
Associated effectively with an assessment of the responsibility of the grant giver in how they were monitoring and dealing with the agency. So on a sample basis, we do this in the HSE, and I think we'll be talking about that next week. But we extended it as well to other grant givers. Effectively, we're looking at how business is done and how they relate to the grant.
And how
giver.
did you establish then that there was an issue here with a double claim? Was this for 2012 initially?
It was in relation to 2012.
And how much was that for?
We identified in one of the resource centres that there were claims in respect of attendance at meetings in the Family Support Agency. So that, if you like, was the thing that led us to then ask the Family Support Agency if they had made payments in relation to the same periods.
And what was the outcome of that?
The figure we identified in the course of the audit was that in 1 year, in 2012, from recollection, that the figure was of the order of about 7,000 that had been claimed on both sides.
Okay. And then there was was there an examination then by the local Family Resource Centre into this? Did they do their own examination?
Again, from memory, I think that what happened while the audit was ongoing and before we had communicated to the Family Support Agency, the individual came forward and reported to the resource centre that he had been double claiming.
And while 44,000, which is the total amount that was doubly claimed, may not be a huge figure in the overall scheme of things in terms of your budget, what I'm concerned about here, Mr McBride, is process. And I think it's important because it's not just in relation to this particular issue. This could have implications for other public bodies, because I'm trying to establish then what happened in terms of how we got to resolve this issue. So this at some point was reported to SIPO. So who reported it to SIPO initially?
Yeah, we wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in writing to SIPO, can you explain to me then what you did, specifically in what way was that reported to SIPO?
It would have been a disclosure as a finding to SIPO, and then they would have conducted their own review. And it was the SIPO report then that gave the determination that because it was a double claim as such, that all the claims were deemed invalid, and we've been instructed, and quite happily so, to look to recoup.
But Ms Hannah, that's not how it transpired. What actually happened was there was a delay in SIPO investigating this, because what TUSLA actually did is simply made a disclosure. And in making a disclosure, there's a differentiation between making a disclosure and making a complaint.
No,
so SIPO did not. One sec, bear with me now. So SIPO, and it's my understanding, and I'll ask the Comptroller and Auditor General to confirm this, my understanding is that there was some delay in SIPO examining this, and it was only when the Comptroller and Auditor General's office contacted SIPO that there was actually an inspector appointed. So I'm asking, my question is, was there a complaint made by TUSLA, or was it simply a disclosure?
The advice that we were given at the time was that it was surrounding not only the individual but the auditors.
Was it a complaint or was it a disclosure?
The advice, it was a disclosure. We were advised that we couldn't make a complaint.
You were advised that you could not make a complaint?
That's my understanding, because we did not engage the auditors. There was an issue regarding the auditors as well that we could not.
Mr McCarthy, then what was your role in this? Would you have been frustrated at this point that a disclosure was made and not a complaint?
Well, I have to say, obviously, I'm a member of the Standards in Public Office Commission as well. So the report from TUSLA to the Standards in Public Office Commission was a report that there had been double claiming, but it didn't name an individual. And and I have a copy of the Commission's report in relation to that. The chairman of the Commission then wrote back to TUSLA to say, can you tell us who the individual was, because we can't act unless we know who the individual is. And so at that stage, further detail was provided by TUSLA in relation to the matter. And the Commission decided on its own volition to then carry out an investigation.
And not because they had received a complaint as such, but from their own volition. But would your office have, at that point, would your office have had any contact with SIPO? Asking questions about whether or not there was an examination?
Well, again, because I'm a member of the Commission, I was aware of developments. Okay. The chairman of the Commission wrote to me as a member and asked for assistance with the thing, and I seconded 2 members of staff to assist with investigation of the claim forms when they were requisitioned.
But when this first came to light, so when TUSLA was first made aware of it, would they have dealt with it satisfactorily in terms of we need to make a complaint, we need to inform SIPO, or did they say, well, listen, it's more an issue for the local organisation, for the local funder to deal with? I'm not wearing your SIPO hat, wearing your Controller and Auditor General hat, because you're here obviously as the CNAG, you're not speaking for SIPO.
I think there was a view that the director in question was attending meetings of the Family Support Agency and therefore should properly be remunerated. There wasn't a desire or a wish to progress the matter and report it initially.
Would that concern you, Mr. Lechwright, if that desire wasn't, if the Controller and Auditor General felt there wasn't a desire there to deal with it, would that be a concern to you?
Well, it certainly would.
Can you then do a note for me in terms of process? Because I think there's a valuable lesson to be learned here. If these issues arise again, that I'm not sure, Ms Hannah, maybe you can explain to us where you got the advice that you should make a disclosure and not a complaint. I think maybe there needs to be some education within public bodies as to what their actual requirements are, because if you just simply report something and you don't make a complaint, then it may not be acted upon, and if it's not acted upon, then there's a difficulty. If you make a complaint, it has to be acted upon. So you might just come back to us in terms of process and whether or not lessons have been learned. But also in your report here, on page 16, it says that the Commission also found that it's a matter for the agency to recoup any monies that may be due. So what was the total amount of money that was due over the 5-year period here?
Approximately 50,000.
50, and how much was recouped?
We're in legal discussions at the moment with the solicitor to recoup the monies. Our legal team is engaged with their...
How much have you recouped?
Nothing so far.
Nothing?
No.
And how many years later is that?
We only engaged with the solicitors this year following the SIPO report.
And is that the full extent of it? Because was there not an agreement then between the local service provider and the individual involved where he would make a contribution of €25,000 and not the full amount? I don't know whether the Controller is aware of that. Was there, or are you aware of that, Mr. McCarthy?
Yes, I am. I'm just looking for the date. Was it 2013?
Yes,
please.
Of course.
We do take that seriously, absolutely take that seriously, and we engaged a third-party independent audit to go down to the Family Resource Centre to complete a very detailed audit of the practices and processes in the Family Resource Centre to give us reassurance that any future monies given to that Family Resource Centre would be used as they are intended to be used.
Well, the Controller is urgent there. Can I say, Ms Hannah, that I'm not assured, and I'm not assured because not one single cent of the money has been paid back, and notwithstanding that you're involved in legal discussions, what I've put to you is that there was problems with process in the first place, as far as I can see, in terms of how this was dealt with and reported and then eventually examined. There was an acceptance by the Commission, and that was accepted by TUSLA, that this money would have to be repaid in full. Not 1 cent has been paid back to date. In all of that, there was also an agreement reached between the individual and the local service provider that he would only pay back half of the amount that was due. And yet that hasn't even been paid back. So that doesn't fill me with confidence. I'm sorry that this issue has been taken seriously and has been dealt with, but if Mr McCarthy can confirm if there was an agreement reached.
The figure, which I think may be closer to 44,000, I'm not sure, but that figure related to the period 2008 to 2013. there weren't records for a longer period. So I think it's just, even though he was a director for a longer period.
But was there an agreement locally to pay 25,000?
That occurred in around August 2013, where the director came forward to the centre and told the centre that he had been double claimed.
And this was before the sub sent into TUSLA. That was in 2015, was it, or 14, 15?
We were established 1st of January 2014.
14, so it was afterwards. Yeah.
Anything before that would have been managed by the
family resource centres. But you take my point that there is obviously maybe lessons to be learned, and also you might give this committee an update as to what is the legal position at the moment and when you expect to get the money back, because I'm sure the taxpayers watching will want every cent of it back if there was in fact a double claim. And I think the individual involved has accepted liability and accepted wrongdoing as well at the SIPO hearing. So all the more reason why we should get the money back. Just one more. Can I just one question if I can? Yeah, just very quickly. And again, because I'm under time, you might just need to come back to me with this afterwards. I'm looking for detail in terms of the turnover in social workers. My understanding is that it's quite high. But maybe you might be able to just very quickly give us the numbers, and also have you a difficulty in this area in retaining staff? And it is one of the areas that has been brought to my attention where, because of the remuneration and pay, that it can be quite difficult to retain staff. Now, that's anecdotal, that's what's reported back to me, but you might be able to give us some figures now, and then if you need to give us a more detailed analysis to follow up, that would be helpful as well, Mr. McBride.
I think maybe we could give you, yes, Chair, we can certainly give some detail. We do have a turnover figure for social workers. I think it's 6.something%. Actually compares reasonably favourably in relation to other jurisdictions, I have to say. A recent study by the British Association of Social Workers were finding that child protection social workers were only hanging around for 18 months. 18 months. We're doing significantly better than that, I'm pleased to say. But yes, you're correct, Deputy Cullinane, that retention is a challenge for us. We're actually recruiting quite large numbers, but retaining those social workers at the front line is a challenge. What we're doing about that is we are conducting exit interviews, so we know why people are leaving. We're trying to look at, well, we are in fact expanding what's called our senior practitioner scheme, so that every social work team will have a senior practitioner attached to it, so there's something of a career progression, a career path for a social worker to become a senior practitioner. In other words, staying in practice rather than necessarily... Is
that the grade of an advanced social worker practitioner? Is that grade still in existence?
We call them senior practitioners, but it sounds the same thing, yes. So trying to keep people in practice rather than their career path always having to lead them into management.
Can you give us just the figures, and I'm not now because I don't expect you to have them on at your fingertips, but can you give us figures and write back into us in terms of what is the turnover year on year, maybe just over the last 2 or 3 years, just to give us some flavour as to whether or not there is a difficulty here?
Approximately 7%. I think it's reduced during 2017, but okay. I'll confirm.
7% is the turnover?
There was a turnover, yes.
Okay. Would that be unusually high, or would that be a general figure across the public service?
In terms of social workers, as the Chief Executive Officer said, it's not particularly high by international standards. I remember a couple of years ago doing some work on that myself, and we were seeing in other jurisdictions anything between 15 and 24%. So it's, you know, comparably, and I think there's been some work done with TUSLA, even in terms of UCD, looking at retention rates within social work at the moment, which is ongoing, and they're finding that it's not a particular problem. It's more, as was said, it's the manner of the work, the protection of caseloads for new staff, etc. Once people come into the Child Protection Welfare Service, they actually, well, they enjoy the work, but they actually get great satisfaction from that work. So it's a matter of giving them supports.
And maybe what I'll do, because I'm up on time, go here, look, I have the number, I'll write in to yourself just for some follow-up questions in terms of specifically what detail I was looking for, and I'll leave it at that. Is it okay? And thank the witnesses for their response.
Yes. A view from me in relation to terms and conditions, which I think the Deputy alluded to, I've certainly opened discussions with the Secretary-General in the Department to say that we really need to look at perhaps differentiated terms and conditions for child protection social workers, as someone who's managed social work for all the care groups, older people, disability and all, I can safely say that the child protection shift, and I've said this publicly, is the hardest shift, and perhaps we need to be looking at differentiated rates, but that's not entirely within my gift.
Okay.